Good morning, and welcome to today's episode of the Coherence Project Podcast. Our guest today is a musician, writer, and teaching artist, Michael Manley, whose remarkable journey transformed a life-changing journey into the creation of HornFlow, a unique teaching method that helps people easily learn to play the horn. So, Michael, welcome to our show today.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to see you. And in all transparency, Michael was once a client of mine. He was once a coaching client of mine. And we've been friends for a long time. And certainly he was a big supporter of the Diamond Mine Academy when we began that. So it's really my pleasure to get back with Michael and have a conversation with him about what he's been doing and what particularly he's written a book and what he's doing with this with HornFlow. Did I say it correctly? HornFlow.
Yeah.
And so what I love to do always when I start a new podcast with someone new to the audience is find out, what did you love to do when you were a little boy, like 5 or 6 years old? I'll share mine so you have an idea what we're talking about. It doesn't have to be long. Just a little idea gives an inkling into what your life looked like when you were a little boy. For me, I grew up in Southwest Georgia in a little town called Albany. It's near the panhandle of Florida. We spent a lot of time on the beach. But when I was a little boy, 5 or 6 years old, going on adventures on my bicycle were my favorite thing to do. I had a bicycle and I could go anywhere I wanted to go in the neighborhood, anywhere around. I mean, I was free to go anywhere. And we had all these wonderful woods near our home. And I had a favorite place that I liked to go called the Monkey Tree. And of all the places to go, the Monkey Tree just wasn't a particularly pretty tree. It was just a little stubby tree with some great big limbs that I could kind of sit and hang out in and watch people and watch the world. And that's probably when I first recognized there was something deeper within me. I went to Sunday school and learned about Jesus, but I didn't resonate with who they talked about. But there was something within me. There was a presence within me. I call that now Yeshua. Yeshua. It was probably it was my version of the presence of a divine presence within myself. And that's what's been developed today. And it's come back now that we've gotten into the word, we've gotten rid of the word Jesus, because that was never his word. So that's my story. I love to go out and sort of hang out and get to know my divine self, what I call Yeshua. I am Yeshua. And that's kind of how I got into this stuff. So tell me a little bit and I loved it. I could sit out there in that tree for days and just keep myself company. And I was different than other boys because I didn't play sports. So I was much more of an adventurer. I liked to adventure into the woods and like I just said. So what did you love to do, Michael? Where did you grow up and what did you love to do when you were a young boy about that age?
So that's a really good question. I grew up in the state of Maryland, in Western Maryland, and my parents were more from the DC-ish area, but my dad was a very kind of introspective artist. So my dad was a painter, but ended up going into graphic design and taking a skill and becoming that kind of professional, and did paint throughout his life. And always wanted to live kind of in the middle of nowhere. So we started by living in this little town called Mount Airy, Maryland. When I was 10, we actually moved even farther out to Western Maryland to a smaller town called Boonesboro. And so around the age of 5, I was probably playing with my friends Scotty and Sean next door. They lived on a small farm. And so I think the idea of play is what resonates with me and thinking about that time in my life. And just the idea of that creativity of children and, just making up games with each other. And my sister was 2 years older than me. So I was the youngest, and she would often play as well with me. And she was my family is creative in very odd ways. So my sister we would play The Wizard of Oz, and she would be Dorothy and I would be Toto. So We also played. We were also into TV and film and stuff like it from an early age. And I remember we were watching like the Avengers, the original Avengers, and she would play with me, and she would be Mrs. Peel, and I would be Steed. I don't have much memory of what that looked like, but I just would think about that aspect of creativity and play in terms of how I looked at the world. And I was not into sports either. So the idea of playing Little League, I remember my dad, when I was a little older, tried to get me interested in Little League. And I don't have great binocular eyesight. So I have an astigmatism, which makes my depth perception pretty bad. So I was never great at anything that involved catching or hitting. And I just remember, I guess, part of my creativity and my creative self is that my dad wanted me to play baseball and, Little League. And I was sitting in the outfield with a glove on my hand and nothing was happening for like, I was so bored. It wasn't that I didn't.
I know exactly what you mean. I'd go out in left field, and I was kind of like Ferdinand the Bull. I'd go out there and be smelling the flowers and stuff. I had no interest in playing that game whatsoever, and hope that the ball wouldn't come out so that I wouldn't have to stop smelling the flowers.
Yeah.
And enjoying my alone time out in the middle of whatever that field is where they barely hit the ball.
Right. And so I couldn't relate to it. To me, it was just, it was like a foreign language. Uh-huh. It was not a language that spoke to me. But my dad was very creative in the visual respect, and would do a lot of that with us, creativity wise. And then his dad, my grandfather, was not a professional artist, but he was a singer. So my grandfather sang, actually sang with at the time, the Washington Redskins football team had a glee club back in the 50s or whatever it was.
Wow.
And my grandfather sang in their glee club, and my dad got to go watch them practice and get to the games and stuff because my grandfather sang in the glee club. So
did you ever go see him sing?
I didn't. My grandfather, it was ironic because my grandfather had a very pronounced stutter when he spoke. And so I remember him speaking with his stutter, but when he sang, of course, he never had a stutter. And the difference in our ages was such that I don't think I ever got to hear him sing like in a church or much. And I don't think there was many recordings. There probably maybe are some if I dig through the internet. It would be great to find some recordings of him with that football team glee club.
Very good. Let me see something here. There we go. Hello, Flurry. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I see someone who's made a comment. Please, if you got some questions, you have a question for me or Michael, please put them in the comments, and we'll see what we can do to answer them for you. Oh, I love that. So I can see, like you, like me, we were creative as boys. We weren't, and I'm not saying that if you played football you weren't creative. I'm just saying that those of us most of us that were gay, didn't really go in for sort of the normal activities that other boys like to play in. And we like being creative, and that's just part of who we are. When did you, let's move forward and get to you have a pretty interesting story about, give us up to the point where you wanted at some point you decided you wanted to play the French horn, and then you got damaged. Bring us into when were you first introduced to being a musician, and then bring us into what happened when you got attacked.
Yeah. So I didn't grow up, even though my grandfather sang, I didn't grow up in a family that was playing music at home, like on instruments or much, but I was a big movie buff. I remember just being really into film at a young age, and loving Disney films and, The Wizard of Oz and all of those classic movies. And so I was age 10 or 11 when Star Wars came out. And I had luckily been the beneficiary of an elementary school instrumental music program. So a lot of times instrumental music doesn't start until 6th grade in the US. but in my time, it started, I want to say, in 4th or 5th grade. So I played the trumpet as a 4th or 5th grader, and I enjoyed it. I was pretty good at it. And then I was in 6th grade, probably when Star Wars came out. And that was also the year that we moved to this smaller town of Boonesboro. So I was in a new school. Everything was changing. And I was, just enraptured by Star Wars, as a lot of 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds were when
yes, yes.
And so I remember loving the music, and that was how I got into music, was really through film. And probably, I was aware of film music. I didn't grow up in a household where, my parents were playing string quartets or Beethoven sonatas or ballets or operas on the record player, right? So I didn't grow up with a European musical tradition, but for Americans, that tradition is really through a lot of times film, and now film and video game music. So I was just really thrilled with the music. And then I was starting school the next year, and our band director said, well, we have too many trumpet players and we need somebody to play this French horn. And I was like, well, what's a French horn? And he showed it to me, and I was like, that's what it looks like up there. And so I said, why does it point
the for a second, just point to those two instruments. Those are French horns, right?
Yeah. And so I have my other French horn here that I'll just show you. And so when we're playing the horn, if you notice, if you've ever been to a concert, or you probably seen musicians play in an orchestra. So the trumpet and the trombone and the French horn and the tuba all have this big bell, right? And so this is where the sound, this is the resonator, much like the old horn on an RCA Victor record player, right? The gramophone. Mm-hmm. So this is the speaker in a way. This is the amplifier. And so for trumpet and trombone and tuba, the tuba points up, the trumpets and the trombones point this way. Well, the French horn points this way. So I was always like, well, why does it point the wrong way? And what is this instrument? And so I took one home before the summer, and I started making sounds on it. And I realized that it was the Star Wars instrument, what I was thinking of as the Star Wars instrument. So if you think about the very iconic scene in Star Wars with one of the most iconic themes, right, which is the Force theme. And so you see this image of Mark Hamill playing Luke Skywalker, and it's dusk, and there's two suns behind him. And on the soundtrack, we hear. So
yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. So that that 8 bars or whatever, that that's why I fell in love with the French horn. And so I started making a sound as over the summer break, and I realized that was what I'd heard in Star Wars. And so I was a skilled trumpet player in terms of like the students. I practiced, and I got better than most of the other students. But when I played the French horn, I just got crazy about music. And so I knew from about 8th grade that I wanted to be a musician or a teacher of music, which was odd because most kids have no idea what they want to do until much later in life.
Wow. So that's I didn't know that part of your story. I love it. It was Star Wars was sort of the catalyst for you that got you really interested in that. Now then you got to college, and that's when bring us up to what was going on at the time that you had this accident and what happened. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So my life has been a kind of a mix of profound opportunity and coincidence and profound challenge. And so going back, yeah. And it's crazy.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So I want to first start by going back to that 8th grade, 9th grade period. So so to let you know, I said my dad was a bit of an introspective kind of a person. And
Mhm.
we moved to this house, and it was on a mountain, right? The house has like another house like a half a mile away. I mean, it's literally just a house in the middle of the woods. And so between 8th grade, I've been playing the French horn for about a year. Really, it's 2 years now, and I got really into it. And I wanted to go to. My mom found out about this. I found out about a summer opportunity through my band director, and my mom helped me research it. And I ended up going to like a summer music camp. And
Wow.
so it was at Shenandoah College and Conservatory in Shenandoah, Virginia. And I get there, and the teacher is asking us all where we're from. And so I said, I'm from Boonesboro, Maryland, which is like saying I'm from Yeehaw Junction or somewhere, because nobody's ever heard of this place. And his eyes got very wide, and he said, really? And I said, you've heard of it? And so he said, of course. And he told me about a man who was making French horns. He was one of only 2 makers of handcrafted French horns in America at the time. And he lived a mile away from me down the mountain in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods. And so I learned about this from this music camp. And so I told my mom this when I got back from the camp, and she said, well, we've got to meet this person, and we got to learn who he is. And so she took me down, introduced me, and he became like a lifelong friend and mentor to me. And so he made these French horns, and I got to meet a lot of interesting people, because I would just go down to his shop in the summertime and hang out, and world-class French horn players were coming through there. And so when I got to be a senior in high school, I was auditioning at Peabody Conservatory and University of Maryland, some other places. I couldn't really afford to go to conservatory, even though they gave me a tiny bit of scholarship money. So I was going to go to the University of Maryland. Well, Mr. Lawson, as I called him at the time, called me up. It was like maybe April of my senior year of high school. And he said, the French horn teacher at Florida State is getting his horn repaired in my shop. You should come down and audition for him. So I took my horn, I went down a mile down the mountain, and I played an audition, and I got a full scholarship to Florida State and ended up going there.
Wow, take a pause. That certainly is we're celebrating. So you got a full scholarship to FSU, Florida State University.
Yes.
That the one in Jacksonville or Tallahassee? I can't always get confused. Yeah, I thought so. I grew up down in that area, and I have to this day I still get it right. I grew up very close to Tallahassee. So,
well, and I'm gonna blow your mind, because when I was a junior and senior in college, I played in the Albany Symphony in Georgia.
You're kidding me! I never knew that.
Yeah, but they pronounced it Albany back then.
Albany. It's called Albany, Albany, Georgia. I'm from Albany, Georgia.
Yes.
It's Albany. It ain't Albany like we have in New York. It's Albany.
Albany. Yeah.
So you played the Albany Symphony? Yeah, my cousin Diane Cunningham used to sing with it. She went back to learn to become an opera singer, and she sang everything in Albany. She was well known for she had a beautiful voice, and she sang opera for the Albany Symphony all the time. And she sang it at my mother's funeral, actually. So so the Albany Symphony was actually a pretty decent little symphony in that part of the world in those days.
Yeah. It was a fun job too to have.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why I ended up at Florida State. And then I ended up going to graduate school in the State University of New York at Stony Brook on Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my first year of graduate school, I had to fix a major problem with some of my playing fundamentals. And it was something my teacher in undergrad never fixed. And my graduate teacher said, we kind of have to just redo everything that relates to how your lips are performing. And so I had to change the position and everything of my horn on my face. And that took a year to get through. And I thought, oh, okay, well, now I figured out how to play the horn. Now I can like really get going. My second year of graduate school, I got an opportunity to audition for a chamber ensemble in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I decided to go, and it was in New York, so I was going to drive. And I originally I was annoyed because I was like, I didn't want to drive out there to take an audition. I thought they should just hire me to play a concert, and then they can decide if they like me or not. Well, I was feeling, and I never had this. I rarely had this feeling, and I certainly didn't believe it at the time, of intuition and superstition, or the universe, or any of this, right? Well, everything in my being was telling me not to go on this trip. I just had a feeling this was not something I should do. And so I decided, well, I told these people I would do it. I can't let them down. So I decided to make this trip. I even asked my partner at the time if he would go with me, because I was feeling really anxious, and he had work and couldn't do it. So I make this trip, and everything goes wrong on this day. I get on the Pennsylvania Turnpike way too early, and I add hours to my travel time. And I get to Pittsburgh, and I'm supposed to be staying with, a friend on their couch, and I'm just so late, and everything is so off what it's supposed
Everything
to be.
is just so incoherent.
Incoherent completely. And so I just decide, well, I'm going to just get a hotel or something, because this isn't working out. Well, I got very, very lost in Pittsburgh, and I ended up in a very bad section of town. I got out of my car to make a phone call, because at that time we had no cell phones. And so it was a gas station. It was pretty well lit. And I realized quickly that I was in the wrong place, and I should get back in my car. Well, on my way back to my car, I get kind of jumped from behind, and somebody with maybe brass knuckles or something kind of just clocks me, and my jaw is broken in 3 places. And so I get back in my car somehow, and I drive myself. I'd seen, a sign with a Red Cross on it for a hospital somewhere in my lost travels through Pittsburgh. So I made my way to the hospital, and thankfully that was all that happened to me. But so
that's all that happened to you. I think that's pretty significant. Personally.
Yeah, I mean, it was major, but at the time I was like just glad to be alive, because I was like, it couldn't be much worse. So I'm in the hospital, and so I obviously I had to have surgery, and they kind of put everything back together, and I was recovering in Maryland with my parents, because I couldn't obviously. And I couldn't really attend school or practice or anything. So
how did you? Probably couldn't even eat, I imagine.
Yeah, you had to drink everything, which was not fun at all. And so everything was in a blender, and I couldn't practice or do anything. So I also lost a molar and very far in the back on the right side. And some of my other teeth were rotated as much as like 30 and 40 degrees. So they put everything back together. So I'm 6 weeks later, I get all this metal taken out of my mouth, and I can barely. I'm really eager to get back to my French horn. I can barely make a sound on the first day, and before this, while my jaw is wired shut, I'm at my parents' house. I come out of the bathroom one day, and my mom says to me, "Michael, why do you have toothpaste all over your face?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And so I went and looked in the mirror, and I brushed my teeth, and there was toothpaste kind of here on this part of my left chin. And I was surprised because I didn't feel it. And so it's because I have nerve damage on this quadrant of my chin. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor and you get a procedure, but you have Novocaine, but the Novocaine isn't completely worn off. So I have this permanent, but not total nerve damage. So in this context, everything comes off my mouth. I'm eager to start practicing and can barely play a note. And my first thought is, I have nerve damage and I'm never going to be able to play again. And so this was really devastating because, if you're an athlete or if you're an artist or whatever your passion is that you're devoting a lot of your efforts to, it becomes your whole identity. So I didn't have any other self-concept aside from being a musician. And I couldn't figure out how I was going to relate to all of my friends, because my way of connecting with them was through music making. So I felt very alone. I felt very depressed. And I felt like I didn't know what I was going to do, because this was my whole life. So I decided I had two choices. I could just believe the story that I told myself, that I had this nerve damage and I would never play again, or I could just get my horn out the next day and start over, right? And so that's what I did. And I realized that it was actually not the nerve damage. That wasn't my problem at all. But when your jaw's wide shut, you're not talking, you're not chewing. Obviously, I wasn't practicing. So all these muscles were just very, very out of shape. So once I started practicing, I realized that that I was going to improve. And so I was able to somehow finish my graduate degree on time. I graduated the same year, which is crazy.
And I guess your graduate was in the French horn, right?
Yeah, I got 2 degrees in performance. I don't recommend that, but that was what I did. I got 2 degrees in French horn performance.
When in that story, I mean, you know, you kind of when did you realize? I mean, when we're in something, going back and telling the story now when we've gotten through it, it's easy because we've gotten through it. We know what the outcome is. But when you're in it, that's when you really have to have some faith. And so tell me, go back to those moments when you were practicing and you really had no idea if it was going to ever actually work. And what happened? How did you, one of the questions, a couple of questions Flory asked, he said, how can music, I'll read both questions and maybe you can work this into your answer. How can music and creative expression help people heal from trauma and build hope, especially in communities experiencing hardship? And what is the most important lesson in your life-changing journey that has taught you? And what advice would you give to young people facing difficult challenges? I think that's kind of part of what I'm talking about. Is it, like you say, when you're in that challenging situation and you don't know what the outcome is. So to go back into what happened that all of a sudden said, you know what, this is not holding me back. I'm still going to become one of the best French horn players on the planet. When did that talk about that shift inside of you, that transformational shift inside of you said, yes, I can do this and I'm going to do it. I'm going to be good at it.
I think it was a combination of persistence and just stubbornness on my part to say, I'm not going to accept that yesterday is going to define today. And I was also not, and I talk about this I do a web class for my HornFlow teaching community that I'm building out. But I talk about this in my web class a lot too, which is the idea that I was not defeated or daunted by the idea that I was going to have to go back to square one, to the time when I was in maybe 7th or 8th grade, right? As a graduate student, that's where I was in terms of my physical ability to play. So I was not afraid to take my playing completely back to square one and rebuild it. And luckily, I saw some signs of hope the second day that I could do that. And so on the French horn, this is a little bit wonky, but I'll take 1 minute to show you. So in the world of, and this is actually kind of spiritually, it ties in. So every vibration is a mixture of other overtones, right? And other vibrations. So if you ever hear a Tibetan prayer bowl, there's metals in that bowl that resonate at different frequencies and different pitches. And that's where you get those rich sounds. Well, every vibration, when we increase the speed of any vibration, what happens is the next note that comes out is the next overtone or partial or harmonic in whatever that series is. So for example, if I were to play the second harmonic, the first one is very, I can actually play the first one. So the first harmonic in the key of F on the French horn is all the way down here. That's called the fundamental. Now, the next note up from that is actually one whole octave above it. And the next harmonic is a fifth above that. And then a fourth. And then they keep going up. And we can keep going. But the point is that these harmonics get closer and closer together the higher we go. The faster the vibration becomes. And so what I started doing was I just started playing slurs on these harmonics, just the most basic. And what I did, and what is the core of my teaching is I took out looking at music, I took out using my fingers, I took out doing any articulation with my tongue. And I was just focused on playing these natural harmonic slurs in these patterns because I didn't want to occupy my brain with anything else. And I was focused on just my air and my vibration, so that this process of kind of eliminating everything except those core two ingredients helped me rebuild my playing. And that was not something that I was taught. I mean, often, we're taught to play scales first. And if you think about what I just played, instead of playing everything with my fingers, I was playing the same distance on these harmonics. And so this became the core of my HornFlow method. And the flow part comes from when we eliminate all the brain work that we have to do if we're thinking about rhythm or fingers or music or articulation. We can actually get into that flow state of our practice by just focusing on these harmonic series slurs.
Wow. Talk about, that's almost like the definition of coherence in itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
The flow, it's like, forget all the other stuff that don't matter. I mean, they do matter because you got to be able to play the chords. But the reality is, once you get all into the alignment of your breath and your heart and your vibration, then the other part just gets easier, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's this idea again of like the music of the spheres, right? So we're focusing just on these harmonics, which if you were to play a Tibetan prayer bowl, you might hear a lot of these together, right? Like being resonating in the air, because those overtones all also sound as we're doing this. But, focusing and I still do that to this day. Like, I still practice the first notes I play every day are just a very long harmonic slur. And I do these in different keys. And every time, by the way, we put vowels down on our brass instrument, all we're doing is we're adding or we're taking away length. So all these weird pieces of plumbing here just add distance or take distance away. So everything has these same harmonics. So if I'm in this key, and just those kind of slow, slurred harmonics, they kind of get your own kind of like, I mean, it feels to me like I'm kind of getting in touch with those core fundamental vibrations, even in my own body, by just playing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everything in the universe can be understood by energy, frequency, and vibration. Yeah. Everything is sound. Everything in the universe is sound. That's why I think this story is so fascinating, because what you did was, as a professional, you just cut out what you didn't need, all the extra stuff, which is great because it really adds flavor. But, having that, being in coherence with your vibration of your being and in resonance with the universe. Wow, that's really so that's what makes the HornFlow method better. Is you're not focusing on traditional, do the scales, go up and down. You're actually focusing on getting in harmony with your body and the sounds and everything else within the frequency of the universe itself.
Yes, and the other kind of technical part of this is that if we can get from the distances with just our air and our vibration in the right way, then once we add the fingers, we're doing exactly the same thing, right? It's just the same use of our air. So I could try to teach a student a 2-octave slur I'll do the next note up, which is our second valve. So going up a half step. Like I could teach them those notes, but they'd have to look at a book, they'd have to work their fingers, or we could just play the same distance. And if we can play the distance, then everything is working with our kind of engine and our fuel. And then if we think of the fingers as the wheels and the steering wheel and all these other little extra things, then it's easier. So instead of trying to teach somebody things that are going to frustrate them right away, about this, that maybe taking them out of that focus on the vibration and the air, and the lips respond to the air. And so the lips are just like a sail on a sailboat. They don't have a mind of their own. They're not telling themselves what to do. It's just like a kite on the air or a sailboat sail. So we have to get that coordination, and just playing the distance first and then learning the scale after is so much more powerful for learning.
Wow. That's amazing. So what would you, if someone wanted to, and we'll drop the link in later, if someone wanted to, and I know that you do some teaching online, if someone was interested in learning how to play the French horn, or do you just teach the French horn, or do you teach other things as well?
So I teach all brass students. Most of my adult clients tend to be French horn players, but I've worked with beginning brass players and even returners who play trombone and play trumpet as well. So all of the fundamentals are the same in terms of this air and vibration. So if I'm on a trumpet, the place we're playing in those harmonic series is different. The trumpet plays where the notes are a little bit more farther apart in the same register than ours. But the fundamentals about the air and the lips are the same. The mouthpieces are different. This is a plastic trombone mouthpiece I have. You can tell it's a lot bigger than the French horn mouthpiece. But yeah, and so I have a Facebook group called Horn Players United, and that's a great place to find me and connect with me and get some great valuable tips on brass playing. I have a YouTube channel as well, and called HornFlow System, and I host a lot of videos on there as well. So, but yeah, I do have an online learning community around my HornFlow program, which is great.
That's fantastic. Now, so that's that. When we were getting ready to come on, before we went live, you shared with me that you've recently written a book that was inspired by a poem. So I'm going to ask you to do it. You can either go which way you want to go first. You explained to me about how where the poem came from, was your sister, or you can just share the poem and we can go from there. I'd love you to share that poem, because in addition to playing the instrument, you're also a writer. You've written a book, and I want to talk about this poem. I understand, as we talked about before, was what influenced your book. So you take that any way you want and see what we can share with our audience about, trusting in your. I mean, two different mediums. One's playing a horn, one's writing a book. What inspired you? I'll let you tell the story.
So, it's funny, as a musician, we take theory classes in college and we learn about all these great composers. And I was completely intimidated by the idea of ever writing music. I was not ever going to be a composer. Maybe I thought I was never going to be Mozart or Brahms. But I was never intimidated by writing words. And so I was an English minor in my undergrad years and had taken some fiction classes and had written some other stuff while on the road. And I toured I was able to tour for a few years, which is, it's always great if you're a musician and you can get paid to play your instrument, right? It's very hard to get employment sometimes. So I was on some Broadway tours, and I also toured with an opera company, with the New York City Opera National Company. And we're playing the same piece of music every night, and it can be very boring, and you're on a bus all the time. The opera tour was mostly one-nighters, so we were on a bus all the time. And so I started doing some writing while I was on the road. And so I remember having 6 nieces and nephews at the time, and thinking to myself, instead of buying them Christmas presents, I'm going to write them a story. And so I decided to write this story as a present for my nieces and nephews. It became a short novel. And one of my inspirations was a dream I had, which was of this kind of carousel, kind of half buried in sand on sort of like an ocean, cold ocean beach. And so that was one memory. The other inspiration was a name that I came up with when bowling in high school, which I thought was very funny, which was Bucky the Narwhal Boy. And I decided that would actually be a character, but that he would not be the object of ridicule. He would actually be the hero of the story. And he's a boy with a horn growing out of his head. And the third inspiration, which was what also inspired the poem that I wrote before the book, was my dad would often go on these long walks, and we as children would be dragged along, and whether it was at the beach and we're beachcombing for hours, or in the wintertime we were in a park and it was very cold and snowy, and my sister had seen this this kind of rock formation, or a frozen ball of twigs and leaves, and she thought it looked like a princess, and made my dad go get it, and we put it in the car and we took it home. So the poem is inspired by, and she named it Isabella. And so I wrote this poem that I'm going to share that was based on that, and that was what was one of those 3 inspirations for the book.
Yeah, please read it.
I don't think I've shared this. Like, I was going to put this in the book as like a foreword or an afterword, except that I couldn't find my paper copy of it before I published. And so then I found it a year later. I was like, well, shoot, now I have it. But I will read you the poem that was in part of this one inspiration for the book. Crossing the stream on slick rocks, in the water running beneath a paper of ice, each step is a prayer. And through the veil of our breath, we see you, branch, leaf, and twig, wearing flesh of coldest glass. A tree bows, offering diamonds, and the earth wraps you in curves and shadows. We take off our mittens to touch you. Fingers wander your skin of tears and are brought to our lips. Isabella, as we carry you over the creek, it seems we can invent the world. In a few days, you were forgotten, martyred to the sun. The tears that were your skin shed back into the ground, receding into mud. Those were your limbs, bark and twig, which mean nothing. Yet even now, you are beyond our wonder, Isabella, and your silent white church, the only place we've ever returned to. Now, walking on this winter day, I hear a twig crack underfoot and wonder what has happened to us all. Isabella, a queen who bestowed a hope which no longer occurs to us. Yet in our minds, you're still there, in your snow cathedral across the creek, waiting to be found.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Then you wrote a children's book. What's the name of the children's book?
So it's called The Picture Island, and there's a lot of, I think there's always a lot of autobiography in whatever we write. And so there is some in this book too, although I was not conscious of it when I wrote it. And the website is called thepictureisland.com if you want to check out a little bit more about the book. I do want to share that I did have this illustrator named Martin Cowart, who did these amazing illustrations for me. And this is one that she did for the chapter, and it kind of shows you that carousel that I was mentioning. There's also a white buffalo walking there on the beach, who's a main figure in the book as well. And so, in thinking about this book, I thought of, what's a good setting for a children's book, right? And I thought, well, we've got to have, an orphanage run by a terrible old lady, and these kids who have to overcome this horrible situation that they're in. And so, at the same time, there's this story of Bucky, who is born with a horn growing out of his head, and becomes, this ostracized character. So the book is told in these two alternating chapters that we're not sure how they connect until later in the book. And the first one begins at this terrible orphanage called the Bunyan Home for Extra Children, run by Miss Bunyan, who is, all we know about her is that she hates children. And so the picture island refers to a painting, and my dad was a painter, so there's part of that in the book. And the painting is of a map, and the map is of a magical place. And at some point in the book, these kids are off getting firewood because they don't have any playtime, because they work for, they live in this horrible orphanage, and they find a broken picture frame and they put it back together. And it's a frame that this painting has been ripped out of. And the frame, once they put it back together, there's some words written on the back, and it becomes this kind of magic portal into a different world. And so they kind of fall through this picture frame, and they arrive at this cold, snowy island that they call the Picture Island, because eventually they realize, it came from this picture. And because they're in an orphanage and they're not getting an education, because Miss Bunyan doesn't want them to learn to read or do anything, they don't call it a map. They call it, a painting. They call it the Picture Island. So the title comes from the idea that there was this picture frame that contained this ornate map of this island, which is kind of referred to on the cover of the book here. When I first wrote it, I was not aware of Harry Potter at the time. It had just kind of hit in our country. And I first thought, when I finished this book, that it was way too dark for kids. And I was really worried. But then Harry Potter came out, and I realized, okay, somebody else is doing something in this same kind of world, because the book deals with forgiveness. It deals with, bullying. It deals with grief. It deals with all these different things that are kind of heavy for kids. But at the same time, kids are smarter than we give them credit for, and they have all these emotions. So why not address them?
Yeah. Wow, that is amazing. So you've got, and it's just one creative thing leading to another creative thing. So
and it's funny, because the book, in a way, is about storytelling. And so there's a passage in the book that talks about how these kids are orphans. And because they're orphans, they don't have any stories of their own. They didn't have parents to tell them their own histories. And so the adventure they go on is partly their own wanting some sort of story, right? And there's a suggestion that everything that's happened is real, or maybe it was all a shared dream that they had. So we're not really sure. It's left kind of open-ended.
Lovely. So before we close out today, it's been a wonderful conversation. I love just hearing that creative process that you went through. I just want you to, if someone out there in the world is feels stuck, and they feel a passion, what would you say to someone who feels stuck? Maybe they got hurt like you did, and they want to. What is one thing you can tell people to do to get themselves from being unstuck with "I'm not good enough"? It's what it really comes down to. I'm not good enough.
I would say one is to don't be afraid to meet yourself where you are, I certainly, if I wanted to be a painter, my dad was a very good painter and illustrator. I don't know how to draw a smiley face. I mean, I'm terrible. But if I wanted to be in that world, I would just start where I am. And I would say, you know what? This is where I am today, and not be afraid to start from square one. And the other is to remember why you're doing it. So one of the things that I learned through the injury that I related, and that was only the first chapter. Later on, I had to get braces to fix all of the stuff that was going wrong after that surgery with those twisted teeth. And that was a whole other experience of having to go back to square one and relearn how to play. And so what I learned about all this was that when the reason that we do things is important. So the reason that we're making music, or the reason that we're writing a book, or that we're painting a picture, is to share something with the world. And so it's the idea of this external mission. So it's not about us. As long as you can stop making it about you, you'll realize.
I love that. That is it. As long as it's not about you. That is exactly, that is it. If I'm doing something, if I'm doing a podcast, if I'm doing it, it's about me, it's probably not going to have a lot of excitement about it.
Yeah.
But that's what runs my life. It's very clear to me that I'm here as a light worker to be in service to humanity, to raise us to a higher level of consciousness. That's why we have the Coherence Project. It's about getting into coherence with our heart, getting our hearts aligned with everything in our lives, so that we know that we are, when we know who we are and why we're here. And I mean that in the bigger sense. I mean, then whatever it is we do in this journey will just happen, because that's why we're here. And language I use is I am connected to divine source creator. I am part of, we all are. We're all part of prime source creator. And I will repeat mantras like I'm the Christ. I am Heshua. I am all these things. And so are everyone listening to us. So what happens is we get lost in our heads and our egos telling us things that aren't true based on fear. So really what we do is we learn to trust ourselves. That's how I would frame it, is we learn to trust our intuition. Like you didn't trust your intuition when you went to Pittsburgh, right? We've learned to trust our intuition. And so I'm in a stage of my life right now where I'm moving around a lot, and I sold my house last year. I have money left for that, and I'm spending it. And I don't know. And I kind of think, well, I'd better slow down. I'm like, well, slow down for what?
Yeah.
I'm not spending it on things for me. I'm spending it on things that I think are going to make the world better. I've become a good steward with money. And when I came to the realization that nothing really belongs to me in this world, it's not my money. And people will get over the fact that when they think the money in their bank account, it belongs to them, it can be gone tomorrow. It doesn't belong to you. Nothing in the material world belongs. And because I don't need it. I have everything. I am presence. I am, and you are too. And that's what coherence means. It means when we are in alignment with when we embody the truth of who and what we are, everything else becomes easy. And that happens in the eternal now.
Yeah.
That happens in this moment. And like Eckhart Tolle, who always talks about the now, if you get into the eternal now, once you get into this, which we're both in right now, once we get into the eternal now, everything else becomes easier. Because you don't have any fear. There's the absence of fear is freedom and trust. So that's really, and that's what your story is to me, the epitome of. It's like learning to trust yourself and have that freedom to just enjoy your life,
Yeah. And I just realized when you said that this method that I have of working with these just very basic harmonic slurs is a way of getting into the now with my own playing. And that becomes my meditation in a way.
Of course.
But I also want to just say one more thing, which is that what you said is profound. And that's what I did, right? So I'm thinking about coming back, not being able to make a sound on my instrument. And of course, the first thing that happens is my ego goes into overdrive and I start thinking, what are people going to think of me? How am I going to have a career? I can't play the music that I did play, and nobody's going to want to make music with me. And then I had this somewhere along the line, I had a realization, like you said, that just like we don't have the money, we don't have the music, we don't have the art. It's something we give. And that even if I could play one note or two notes, that it was really about serving the world through music. It was never about my own ego. And I let go of all those feelings of what other people would think and of judging myself, and just learned to have gratitude, I guess, for what I could do. And I mean, the irony is that I have worked with people who developed dystonia and other, injuries and things where they can't play their instrument, and they didn't have anything near as bad as happened to them as I did. So I just have to remember to be grateful every day for what I can
gratitude is the antidote to fear. You cannot feel fear and be grateful at the same time. So I do the same thing. I just say I'm grateful. I'm grateful. If I'm going into fear, like, oh my God, I'm going to run out of money. If I buy this, I'm going to run out of money. I'm not going to have enough. Well, let me think. Is that true? Maybe something I don't really need to buy. So, one thing I tell people all the time is don't ever say I can't afford something. Because you certainly can't, because that you just made up a story. What you say is, how can I have this? If it's something that I really want and the universe wants me to have it and it's going to support my mission in the world, the universe is going to find a way for me to have it. Or it's something that my ego wants, and it's like saying, you really don't need that after all. That's not something you really need. I don't need I love that Mustang Mach 4 electric car.
Yeah.
But I don't need that to get by. I have a perfectly wonderful little Mazda that gets me around fine. But so that's what we're saying is one day I may get the electric car, but right now I don't need it, and I don't have the money to buy it, and I don't have any need for it. So it's really about being in coherence with the truth of what's going on in the world and how you're playing your role in it. One of the things that I often tell myself when I'm not getting my way is, Martin, you're not in control.
Yeah.
You're not in control of anything. That life force in me, the life force within us is doing everything. Yeah. Our job is to be present and say yes to it.
Yeah. Wow.
And if it's saying yes, you're going to go and take care of these African people who need some help, and that's what you're going to do. And then sometimes I might do something like that. I catch myself sometimes going into what we call overgiving. And that's also got a negative. I mean, I'm putting myself second. I'm into savior complex. So I have to be very careful not to go into that realm, because that's also driven by the ego. I'm doing it because I want people to like me, to approve of me. So you've got to always be in a space of coherence and listening. And what I always recommend for myself and anybody else is, you're not sure, just take a pause. Nothing has to be decided right this moment. If you need to buy something or you need to do something, take a pause and feel your way to it and see what it is, and ask yourself, is it true that I need this right now? Or is it something that's really going to, I know it is. Does it live in alignment with my North Star, with my mission? It will feel it will resonate with my mission. If it's in alignment with my mission, and I've taken a pause, and it's not there I'm not doing it for my own sense of glorification so that people will like me and support me and care about me, because that's the other side of it. If I'm doing it simply because I want to give away freely so that I can receive, and that's the thing, is about being in flow of giving and receiving. So that's what we're talking about here. When you're in your flow with your instrument or writing your book, that's when we're in coherence, and that's how we get through everything in life. And we are in a time, I believe, in the history of humankind where, excuse me, there is no lack of. If anybody's bored living in this world today, they're asleep.
Yeah.
because we're living in some of the most exciting times in the history of humankind. And I do believe that the universe is, the creator is benevolent. It is love. And what's going on in the material world right now, it ain't love.
Yeah.
It's all fear driven, and it's imploding.
Yeah.
So we need people like you and me.
Yeah.
We need people like you and me to make music.
Absolutely. And the other thing I that's striking me as we close out is that I realized that I had this mission and this ability to teach that only evolved and developed out of this horrible obstacles and things that affected me, like getting my jaw broken, which I wouldn't wish on myself again, and I wouldn't wish on others. But the idea that somehow, regardless of the obstacles we face, that this all somehow feeds where we are and where we need to be. And I wouldn't necessarily have come up with my teaching method if I hadn't had these horrible adversities. So there's something about that as well, about taking everything and realizing that it's all happening for a reason, even though you may not understand it.
That is when you realize that nothing is happening to us, it's all flowing through us, everything shifts.
Yeah.
Everything shifts. And I mean, and it just, we're all, I mean, we're always, I'm always finding myself, how in the hell did this happen? What is the purpose of this unnecessary challenge? But if I begin to focus on it being a challenge as an opportunity for growth and expansion of my own soul, then that's the purpose. That's what coherence is to get ourselves into that. The purpose of this podcast today was to give people some real life experiences of what it's like to be here's two professionals who have learned to live in coherence, who didn't come from a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I live in abundance today.
Yeah.
And it's a mindset. I live in a state of abundance and flow and joy and generosity, knowing that I'm loved, that I'm taken care of. And that as long as I'm staying in coherence and staying in connection with the divine within myself, not something out there, but within me, then I will always be in alignment with the universe and with God, or whatever you want to call that. I call it prime source creator. That's the word that I find that seems to kind of takes it out of the sort of religious norms of God. But prime source creator is like, I am part of prime source creator. We all are. Yeah. And that feels good. That feels exciting.
Absolutely.
And look what you're doing. You said the other day you might go down to Mexico and spend some time down there. I would love to go down and see some of the Mayans and all that ancient stuff going on down there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, this has been a real joy, Michael. I will put some information on how do people find your book. You already talked about that. I'll put a link down in when we put this out, the replay, and I will we will be putting this out as a audio podcast and a video podcast on my YouTube channel and on Spotify and other places where they carry our podcast. Yeah. And when I put those out, I'll make sure we have links to you and some of the things that you've done, so that people can get in touch with you and work with you if they'd like to.
Yeah, and it's the book's on Amazon as well. Michael S. Manley is my author name. And you can just search for The Picture Island, and people can reach out to me individually if you want to friend me on Facebook or send me a direct message. I'm happy to send you a book. You can buy it directly from me. That way I can sign it if people want that. But it is on Amazon and Goodreads and other places. Okay,
that's very good to know. And quickly, I'll just say that if you want to find out more about work that I'm doing in Africa and what inspires me, you can go to our website, which is www.diamondmine.academy.org. And where that comes from is that when I went to Africa and to Kenya a few years ago and went to a refugee camp, and all I could see was like diamonds. These beautiful people, hearts, just beautiful diamonds. I don't mean Jewel. I mean the people that I found there, the refugees were just beautiful people, full of light, full of love. And that's what pulled me into that. And that's where we got the name Diamond Mine Academy from. The idea is to help them get into coherence so they can live happy, fulfilling lives too. So, yeah, I love the work I do. I love the work that you do. And thank you so much for being a guest on our show today.
Well, thank you for having me, Martin. And it's always a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.